Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, and Finster, vice executive cat at ClassicsToday.com, because, of course, Mildred is the other one, but she doesn't often appear on screen, right? Yes, and we're here with the new classical music alphabet, and we're up to the letter O. Yeah, wow. O, the three O's. The Cheerios. Yeah, no, the three O's. Well, we're getting through the alphabet here. And, O is an interesting letter. There are some very famous O composers and some composers who deserve to be famous who happen to belong to the O's. And I think it would be good to talk about a couple of those because that will fortify the letter O. I mean, there's got to be more to an O than Orph, right? I mean, there just has to be. And there is, as it turns out. First, who do we begin with? Oh, yes, Johannes Ockeghem. Yeah, oh my goodness, Johannes. Yeah, his name was Johannes. And he was a remarkable composer. He lived from 1410 to 1497, circa. He's one of those circa guys because no one's quite sure. Renaissance composers, it's not always easy to figure out exactly, when they lived or, what their dates are because nothing is dated. So, it's a rough estimate. His output was not huge, but he was one of the most highly respected composers of the entire 15th century. And he wrote a couple really remarkable works. Mostly he wrote sacred music and songs like everybody back then. And the recording that you should grab is the recording on Naxos, which contains his Requiem and the Missa Prolationum, and also a motet, Intemerata Dei Mater, which I know you go humming to bed every night, with Musica Ficta, conducted by Holten. This is a disc that is likely to stay in print and available, which is like a good thing. But beyond that, Ockeghem was the first composer to make a polyphonic setting of the Requiem Mass. I mean, if you're thinking of Verdi's Requiem, think again. I mean, this sounds basically like Renaissance music, a cappella Renaissance choral music, but it's very, very beautiful. He was considered the greatest contrapuntal master of his age. And we hear that in the Missa Prolationum, which doesn't tell you very much, does it? But what that means is that the entire work, the entire Mass, is built of what they call mensuration canons. In other words, this is, you know what a canon is, right? It's like Row Your Boat, where everybody sings the same tune, entering at staggered intervals. Well, in this case, the staggered intervals, the voices sing the same melody, but at different speeds. And since this is like a 4-part setting, they are 4 different speeds, all going at the same time, from slow to quick, but simultaneously, which means there's going to be some repetition in the quicker voices. And not only that, but the canons don't always have to begin on the same note. In other words, they can rise by intervals. And that's what this Mass does, much like the canons in the Goldberg variations by Bach, where the first one is at the unison, it's the same melody, then the second, whereas the next tune comes in one note ahead, it's the same melody, but it starts on a different note at a different interval. And Ockeghem does that too. So this entire work is based on that, these canons that rise up until you get to the octave, which happens, I think, around the Sanctus or somewhere in there, and then, it concludes. But it is considered to be one of the most remarkable feats of contrapuntal genius ever conceived. When you hear it, all right, she's not into Renaissance sacred music. I mean, can you blame her? She's a cat. Anyway, so, when you hear it, you may not notice that, particular aspect of it. It depends. The intent is not to notice it. The intent is for the mastery of the work, the contrapuntal genius, to be embedded in the general texture, and you should just hear an absolutely gorgeous setting of the Mass text, which is what it is. So he's a major, major guy, and you should know the name and you should know the work. It's important and it's stunning, and you may get more out of it than others. I don't know. You have to listen to it a few hundred times and see how it strikes you. But it's a very beautiful mass setting. And if you like Renaissance choral music like Josquin and, Dufay and all those people, you're gonna love Ockeghem, because he was one of the greats. He really was. So next, well, here's a composer who deserves to be better known, Georges Onslow, or George Onslow. He was half British, half French. He lived from 1784 to 1853, and he's making something of a comeback these days, because back in the day, Onslow was very well known as a composer principally of chamber music, although he wrote 4 really lovely symphonies and a couple of operas and some other things too. He was pretty well-rounded, but he wrote lots of chamber music, 36 string quartets, 34 string quintets, solo sonatas, all kinds of music, and it's really good. The problem with Onslow is that he was rich, and we cannot exaggerate just how serious a problem that is. Not only was he rich, but he was living in France. Now, in France, of course, instrumental music in the German style was not as popular as theatrical music, as opera and ballet and the things that, let French people go and see, fluffy demoiselles cavorting around the stage and whatnot. And so his focus almost exclusively on instrumental music counted against him. And the fact that he was independently wealthy and could do whatever he damn well pleased aroused feelings of jealousy and wasn't good for future biographers. It's like, how do you write a biography about a composer who wrote absolutely beautiful music, but, he was rich and led a happy life, and that was it? I mean, basically, that was Onslow. And so after his death, his music sort of disappeared, and it was, reviled by, the Germans. Wagner hated it. Of course, Wagner hated everything that wasn't him, but, he hated it particularly because, it was instrumental forms, but he was French and English, and there are all kinds of reasons, and people were jealous because he was rich and comfortable, and it's all unmusical, or, not musical considerations that I think, lead to his decline, and the fact that chamber music is a niche within the classical music world generally. It's not the kind of music that excites huge, gusts of popular enthusiasm. It's for intimate listening in the privacy of your home. But the music is really good. He's really, really a solid composer, and you should hear some of his music. And there's another very fine Naxos recording that contains 3 cello sonatas, opus 18, opus 16, and they're opus 16, pardon me. 3 cello sonatas, opus 16, with Maria Kliegel and Nina Tichman, and they are beautiful works. And they really show you how well he could compose, because cello sonatas are not easy to write. You've got a piano, you've got a cello. They don't really go well together. Sometimes they sound like they're playing 2 different pieces. His writing is fluent and lovely and attractive. His themes are shapely. The expression is there. It's not just light, fluffy, nonsense. It's really, really good music. So Onslow is somebody you should get to know. And last but not least, one of the very greatest composers of the 19th century, though seldom acknowledged as such, Jacques Offenbach. Oh, yes. Would we pay attention to him at all if he hadn't tried to write the Tales of Hoffmann, which he died in the middle of? He was an amazing composer, but he wrote comic operetta. And like the greatest British composer of ever, Sir Arthur Sullivan, who was actually not technically British, but English style, you know what I mean, right? I mean, we're not going there. We're not doing national politics, because Offenbach technically was German, but he was living in Paris. He was French, and Sullivan was English, and they were amazing. But because they wrote comic opera, for the most part, they have been disparaged or downgraded or ignored. And Offenbach was incredible. I mean, he wrote dozens of works, and a good dozen or so of them are masterpieces, and they deserve to be performed because the music is wonderfully witty and fun to listen to. And you should at least have Orpheus in the Underworld if you don't have anything else. I mean, there are lots of others, La Vie Parisienne, La Belle Hélène, La Grande Duchesse de Gerolstein, and all kinds of other things like that. And they are just fabulous. But Orpheus in the Underworld is great, and it's where the can-can comes from. The can-can is actually the chorus of demons in hell, believe it or not. It's not marked as a can-can. Technically, it's not a can-can. It's the chorus of demons in hell. But they're singing. Da, 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 da. So there you go. I mean, that tune, you know, was familiar to me in childhood as the commercial for ShopRite supermarkets when they had their sales of canned goods. Now, ShopRite does the can selling ShopRite brand of vegetables in cans for quality that you can trust, for beans, asparagus. Anyway, it was like that. So, yeah, absolutely fantastic. Offenbach should be there in anybody's great list of O's. And there you have it. I'm very interested to see your list of O's. I really am. There are quite a few others, some of them marvelous. And, you know, I can think of, 4 or 5 off the top of my head. And I want to see who you come up with. So keep on listening, friends. But remember, works and recordings, both. Take care.